Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Vaiani. I'm the Secretary General of the World Energy Council France, which is a French member committee of the World Energy Council. And I also chair the Energy Committee of the WFEO, the World Federation of Engineering Organization. For those of you who are not familiar with WFEO, it is a global non-governmental organization that represents the engineering profession worldwide. It is established under the auspices of UNESCO, and it brings together a network of 30 million of engineers across 100 countries. We operate through a different specialized committee and a different working group. And within the Committee of Energy, our main purpose and objective is clearly to share knowledge, best practices, and also to improve international cooperation regarding SDG 7, so affordable and clean energy for all. And this is clearly the principle of our work. But this is not only the principle of the work of the WFEO Energy Committee, but also of the World Energy Council, especially regarding international dialogue. It has started its first energy conferences 100 years ago, right after World War I, and sharing and bringing together experts, leaders, policymakers from all over the world is clearly in its ADN since the beginning. Among our initiatives on the WFEO Committee of Energy, we have launched the World Energy Bridges, which is an international webinar series. And the purpose is very simple. It's to connect energy professionals, engineers, policymakers around the globe to share expertise, real-world experience on energy policy, technology, or innovation. For those who follow us since months or years, we have launched and brought together experts from Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, Americas, and we have covered topics very different, such as electricity access gaps, nuclear energy, solar PV recycling, artificial intelligence for power system, and global energy trends. And today, in this very turbulent period, we are pleased to welcome you to a new session entitled Facing the Energy Trilemma in Turbulent Times, with a specific focus from France and Europe. In this webinar, we will specifically focus on energy policy and how they navigate the complex challenges of the world energy trilemma. And to start, of course, we need to know what we intend by the word energy trilemma. And for that, it is my pleasure to give the floor to Sandra Winkler, Senior Director Insight from the World Energy Council, who has developed the World Energy Trilemma Index more than 15 years ago. And Sandra, with no further delay, I give you the floor, and I'm happy to hear you about this very important topic and insight from the World Energy Council.
Okay, there we go. Merci beaucoup, Marilyn. And bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Before we start, let's actually take a quick step back for a moment. Energy systems today are not just transforming, they're coming under increasing strain. Across regions, leaders are being asked to do something fundamentally difficult to keep energy secure, affordable, and sustainable at the same time, under tighter constraints and in a more fragmented world. And what I'd like to do today is explore what that means in practice and why this is less about managing transitions and more about navigating trade-offs and tensions. So, and this is because energy is not just a sector. Energy remains the operating system of our economies, underpinning industry, mobility, finance, digital infrastructure, and increasingly geopolitical positioning. So when energy systems come under pressure, everything else does too. If we step back, energy systems have evolved through phases, from stability, energy for peace and providing stable systems, to a phase of energy for prosperity, providing energy for growth and access, and energy for sustainability, balanced systems, and that's when the trilemma came into play. But what's different now is that we're no longer in a clean transition from one phase to another. We're in an overlap where the systems are expanding, decarbonizing, digitizing, and fragmenting at the same time. And that creates a very different kind of complexity. Energy, as we all know, is not a bounded sector, but getting bigger. It intersects directly with security, industry, finance, digital infrastructure. And as the Council's Issues Monitor highlights this year, and we'll come to that in a moment, this continued expansion is happening at the same time as systems are transforming. Not before or after, but at the same time. So the system is stretching in multiple directions at once. And one of the biggest shifts, and often underestimated, is demand. Recently, it tends to be simplified into one story, like AI, but in reality, demand is being driven by multiple forces at once. Industrialization, electrification, mobility, urbanization, digitalization. And these forces are compounding, not substituting. And as history shows, when structural drivers align, like this, demand growth can persist for decades. And this is where expansion turns into pressure. We see it in grids and permitting and supply chains, systems trying to absorb change faster than they were designed for. And we see it in real time. For example, the tensions right now around the Strait of Hormuz translate almost immediately into price volatility, and within days into affordability pressure, investment uncertainty, and political response. And that is how tightly coupled the system has become. Though these are not isolated risks, this is how system pressure grows. And as these pressures accumulate, they begin to change how the system behaves. And what we're observing is a shift. Trade-offs are no longer something to manage occasionally. They are becoming structural because the system is now operating closer to its limits, physical, financial, and social. And this is exactly what comes through in the Issues Monitor. What is striking this year is not just which issues are rising, but how the operating environment itself is being reshaped. Geopolitics, for example, is no longer a backdrop. It's become an operating condition. Peace and stability now sit at the top of global uncertainty. At the same time, system capacity, not ambition, is setting the pace. Grids, permitting, delivery constraints are becoming real bottlenecks. Demand is evolving, as I've already mentioned, in ways that are often oversimplified, not one driver, but several unfolding at the same time. And within the system, we're beginning to see visible strain, congestion, curtailment, negative pricing, systems working harder to absorb rapid change. And finally, something more structural is emerging, legitimacy. Question of who pays, who benefits, and whether transitions remain socially and politically acceptable. So what we see is not a lack of progress, but progress under increasing pressure.
Okay.
And what we see when we map these signals is that they do not sit neatly in one place. They cluster across security, affordability, and sustainability, which suggests something very important. The system is no longer dealing with isolated issues, but with interacting pressures across all three dimensions of what we call the trilemma, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But as these pressures interact, trade-offs become increasingly difficult to avoid. And that's not a new insight, but what has changed is the intensity and the visibility of these trade-offs. So what we're observing is a deeper shift. We're no longer navigating transitions defined by direction. We're navigating a system increasingly defined by constraint, where decisions about pace, sequencing, and investment carry more immediate consequences, economic, political, and social. So we're moving from a world of optimization to a world of navigation under pressure. And that is what makes this less of a question about optimization and more a question of leadership. Not choosing between priorities, but working across them, and what we might call at the council an and reality. This is where the trilemma becomes particularly relevant because it reflects the reality that leaders are navigating, not a single outcome, but three dimensions that must be held together simultaneously: security, affordability, and sustainability, and increasingly under real-world constraints. In practice, improving one or even two of these dimensions or outcomes often creates pressure in another. So there is no decision that improves all three at once. And progress in one area tends to come with consequences elsewhere. And that's why leadership is not about eliminating trade-offs, but about navigating them. Over the past 25 years, and it's hard to believe it's been 25 years, the trilemma has evolved alongside energy system. It began as a relatively simple framing introduced by the Council: access, availability, and acceptability. And as the system evolved, there was a conscious shift, particularly in the late 2000s, from framing to measurement, which led to the first global index, which reflected a deliberate shift towards measurement, comparison, and accountability across countries. And over time, that index expanded, reflecting a more complex and interconnected reality across more than 100 countries. But importantly, it was always designed to understand balance, how countries navigate between security, affordability, and sustainability. What's changing today is that it's no longer only about balance, but about holding all three dimensions together simultaneously under pressure, not choosing between them, but working across them. So for many years, the trilemma index has provided a structured way to assess how countries perform across three dimensions, looking at security, reliability, and resilience of supply, affordability, prices and access, sustainability, emissions, and longer-term impacts. And importantly, this was considered within a broader context of stability, governance, and investment conditions. This allowed for comparison, benchmarking, and tracking progress over time. But it also revealed something fundamental. No country solves the trilemma. They continuously rebalance it. And if it's this continued rebalancing that becomes more visible and more difficult under pressure. In Europe, for example, this rebalancing is very visible. Security has moved up rapidly, driven by the geopolitical shifts. Affordability pressures are reshaping or shaping political industrial choices. And sustainability ambition remains strong, but under delivery constraints. One of the most critical trade-offs for Europe today is how to rapidly resecure and decarbonize the system versus keeping the energy socially and politically affordable and remaining competitive. So what we see is not failure, but tension between objectives becoming more visible. France offers a particularly interesting example, and I'm sure you're going to dive into that later today. A system with relatively low carbon electricity generation, but now navigating cost pressures, infrastructure constraints, and societal expectations. And this illustrates something important. Even strong systems are not escaping the trilemma. They experience it more visibly today and are rebalancing it continuously. And that is because the trilemma itself is evolving and needs to be refreshed to support forward-looking discussions of pathways, policies, programs, and projects. Each dimension is expanding. Security must expand beyond fuel supply and diversity to include fuel adequacy, resilience, flexibility, and strategic dependency. Affordability must be expanded beyond prices into capital burden, system costs, and taxpayer exposure. And sustainability must be expanded beyond greenhouse gases into pollution, water, land, biodiversity, materials, and waste, which means that a forward-looking trilemma can no longer be constrained by the limits of historical data. And as these dimensions expand, the system becomes more tightly coupled. The margins of error narrow, and the consequences of decisions become more immediate. So increasingly, the question is no longer only how to balance the three dimensions or how to measure performance, but how to maintain coherence across the system as these pressures interact. And this brings us to the key shift. The trilemma started as a measurement tool. It gave us a snapshot, a benchmark, a way to compare. But today, measurement alone is not enough because the challenge is no longer understanding the system, looking backwards. The challenge is holding it together as pressures multiply in real time, in the here and now. So the trilemma is increasingly being used as a leadership discipline, a way to make trade-offs explicit, explore tensions more deeply, test decisions under pressure, and learn across systems. Because ultimately, this is about maintaining system coherence, not just technically, but economically, socially, and politically. And that is what determines whether energy systems can continue to deliver security, affordability, and sustainability together. So the trilemma is increasingly being used not just to understand the system, but to work within it. And this moment requires a different way of leading and learning, not by trying to eliminate trade-offs, but by making them visible, by learning from what works in other parts of the world, by understanding where systems are under strain, and identifying what can scale across contexts. Because trade-offs are not going away, they're becoming structural, and the question is not whether they exist, but how to navigate them, and whether we can do so in a way that keeps the system coherent over time, and that ultimately is a question of leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for this very clear and insightful presentation of the trilemma, of its history, and of how it can be used today. And now, to illustrate that, or maybe to try it, will be my pleasure to give the floor to Laurent Kueny, Energy Director, Ministry of Energy, France, who will share how French and European energy policies are addressing the different dimensions of the energy trilemma, the trade-off, and what are not already done, but should be done. And I don't know, Laurent, if you are already connected and if you can share your presentation. So I give you the floor.
Do you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Because I had some connectivity problems. Very happy to be here. And thank you, Marilyn, for this introduction. And hello, everybody. Very happy to share some views about the French energy policy. We have published a new document drafting having the 10 years of the next 10 years of investment. And I will try to share the rationale for this energy strategy, of course, with some links with the previous presentation. So I will try to share my presentation like this. So you should be able to see my screen. Wait a minute, I try to put it full screen. I try to do it full screen, but I have some difficulties on this version. No. Do you see my screen? Maybe we'll do it like this. I don't know how you see my screen. It's not the way I would like it to be, but yes, this is because between the Zoom and the screen, it doesn't work. Ajuster le largeur. No. Voilà. It should be a bit better. So let's try like this. Non, ça marche pas. So Wait a second.
It's okay.
No. Yes, thank you. So let's open the presentation. So as I say, we plan a low carbon economy, but it's much more than that. It's an energy strategy, of course, the decarbonation, but also relying on energy security, investment planning, and of course, industrial strategy. What do we do with the investment? We also would like to develop in Europe an industry, a strong industry in the field of energy. So this is integrated in different planning. We have low carbon planning. I mean, how we plan to reduce the emission of carbon, which is a national strategy for low carbon, SNBC, which is to be published very soon, already in consultation. We have this 10 years plan regarding investment strategy and planning for energy. I will elaborate on this plan today. And we have also a plan to adapt our economy, to adapt our industry, to adapt our companies, to adapt our states regarding the climate change, which scenario we take so that we are ready on time to be adapted to the climate which is rapidly evolving. This is important for the continental France, but it's also very important for the islands we have in different parts of the world where you have different type of effect regarding climate change. So let's enter the rationale for PPA3. We have, as you know, in Europe, some planning and joint targets in terms of planning. Of course, it's to reach 2050 in terms of neutral economy, but it's also to cut our emissions by half in 2030 compared to 1990. This is a big political target we have. And yes, there is a lot of debate. Is it possible? How much does it cost? This is a joint target, and this is very important to explain. This is our joint political efforts to say we try to do that. Of course, I hope we will reach at that, but what is very important is that we have a common willing in Europe to have the same target, because we do believe in decarbonation, but we do believe that this is also good for economy, for energy security, and all the trilemma you had elaborated just before. The question is, of course, the framework, and after we will elaborate more on the how we plan in France for the next 10 years. So I won't go into details because most probably you know every of these details on the slide, but we have the joint European climate law with this target embedded in the law. We have the 55 package, which is already embarking to joint effort regarding this target. And we have the REPowerEU, which has been elaborated and accelerated after the war in Ukraine. And we tried to mitigate the impact of the 2022, but also accelerate the implementation of our decarbonation strategy as a response to the crisis of 2022. Of course, today, in front of the crisis in the Middle East, we'll have the same thoughts. Are we going fast enough? Obviously not. But what can we do on shorter term to accelerate this strategy? But our plan was published just before the crisis, so it's also a kind of answer, because the answer we were already giving in France before the crisis was already somehow an answer to the need for acceleration of the decrease of the use of fossil fuel. But just some statement before entering the plan, because you will see our plan relies on a strong belief that the decarbonation should go not only, but also through a big strategy for electrification. But the statement, as you see, is that, yes, we are succeeding now in increasing production. We have been over the past 30 years, but the consumption of electricity is not really rising as we had planned some years ago. We had some 2022, you see, some events. It was related to nuclear fleets, because we had some events in the nuclear fleet, which brought the nuclear safety authority to do some checking and so on corrosion phenomena and so on, which were solved. And now we produce again a lot of nuclear electricity, but also increasing through renewables. But the consumption is not accelerating enough. And this is a statement which brings us not only to implement this energy plan, but also the consumption, the electrification plan we are now drafting to accelerate the switch from fossil use to electricity, because we do think this is one of the big drivers on which we can have an impact regarding the decarbonation strategy. That will come back to that. And second statement, which is quite interesting as well, many countries in Europe say, oh, yes, electrification doesn't work because electricity is too expensive. I mean, everything is related, but have a look. In France, it's not as expensive as in other countries, and it's really going quite low. We have, even with the prices, very, very low prices of electricity, 55 euros something forward prices, which is quite low in comparison with some neighbors, which means low prices, I mean, reasonable prices, let's say, are not enough to electrify an economy. Why? Because it's transferring usages, it's investing in new usage. So it shows that, yes, we need affordable prices, but this is not enough to ensure we will use from fossil fuel to electricity. And this is the experiment, like a laboratory we have in France. We have the same in Sweden. We already have decarbonized or almost all our electricity. We have quite reasonable prices, but it's not enough. And that's why we now have some efforts, some investments on how to do it, how to electrify the economy much quicker. So other statements is that, yes, it's a lot of investment, it's a lot of money, but it's also an industrial strategy. It's also to base this strategy of investment on European industry, trying to also nourish the economy through this investment and trying to be autonomous, to have some strategic autonomy, to ensure we not only switch from one dependency, which are fossil fuel, and we are really living in it every hour with the crisis in the Middle East, to another dependency, which is to rely on one country or the other, and to have two narrow dependencies. So that's why we want a balanced dependency. We are all dependent on the world, in the world economy. We are all exchanging lots of things. We just need to ensure, in the energy particularly, that the dependencies are balanced so that we, in every possible scenario of crisis, of geopolitical events and whatsoever, or economy as well, we have a balanced dependency. And this is what is also embedded in the plan, is also to check every time which dependency are we increasing, which dependency are we reducing, so that it's not only resisting the fossil fuel, it's also checking that the industry in Europe will respond to these challenges at a level which ensure we have some strategic autonomy regarding the dependencies. First statement, this is nuclear. You will see, okay, in 10 years, what can we do nuclear? We do a lot, but it won't produce more product.
We do have an issue with your audio. Is it possible to restart it? Please.
Okay, yeah, it said that you have disconnected. I mean, there is something in the system. Because they have messages saying, so normally it should be okay?
No, there is an echo.
Do you hear me?
Yes, but with an echo, it's not very good.
We tried to solve it because we had some. Do you hear me or it's not good?
Not good, still with an echo.
So when we will add some, the connectivity was not working on my computers.
I'm going to cut your mic and then put it back. I can try.
Is it better?
Much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for this technical difficulties. I hope you had some messages before. You can ask questions just after. So the third statement I was mentioning was nuclear. In 10 years, of course, we don't do miracles for nuclear, but we are preparing for the next phase, which is replacing the current fleet. You see on the screen how many reactors we connected to the grid in the 80s, up to 5 reactors per year, which is quite significant when you compare it to the production of France. So if we don't take care of it, 1 year, sometime we'll try to expand the lifetime, of course, but one time we will need to disconnect. And if we have the same lifetime, we will have to disconnect at 5 nuclear reactors 1 year, which is not possible. So we'll try to play, let's say, with the lifetime expansion to ensure we have not the decline you have at the screen, but something which is more regular so we can adapt. And then, of course, we need to prepare to connect new reactors. And that's why in the strategy, we have a renaissance of nuclear, quite ambitious, which is to embark to the 6th new EPR2 project to be connected after the period of 10 years by 2040. But it's just to embark to the replacement. So in the years 40s, we are ready to connect more and more reactors to get prepared for the time where we will need to shut down the current fleet, which will be 70, maybe 80 some reactors. It's to be negotiated with both the operators and the safety authority. But anyway, it's tried to merge these current lifetime and the starting of the new reactors. And this is the big thing, which is explained. We need both nuclear and renewables. The strategy for reactors in the field of nuclear is to ensure we have a stable production of about 400 terawatt hours, but stable on the longer term. And that is the reason why we are embarking to a lot of reactors to ensure we won't decline in the future. But at the same time, as I explained, we want to electrify. We need also renewables to increase the level of electricity in France to ensure we can both stabilize nuclear, but also have more decarbonized electricity for the usage. We are switching from fossil to electricity. So this is what we have as a statement. But as I said, this brings to an industrial strategy. And I try to put it as a first row of the presentation because it's nuclear, lots of ambition in the field of nuclear. It's offshore, you will see a very high level of ambition, lots of investment in the field. And we are now negotiating a law in the parliament to ensure we will have a stability in the field of legislation to ensure the investment in the field of hydro will be starting, and we plan up to 1.7 terawatt hours pumping dam, which will be very important for the stabilization of our electricity grids in the next years. So this is just a map to show how many companies we will get some input, some new contract deriving from this industrial strategy. And I could have put it a European map. We have lots of companies Europe-wide which will have contracts related to investment. So yes, it's a lot of money. It's also a lot of public money, but it's also a lot of money put it in the economy with strong industry providing some equipment, some projects for the implementation of this strategy. So I will go quite quick in the next slides and just opening the floor for questions. So electrification, just a word on that, very concretely speaking, in the strategy is to increase by 120 terawatt hours in 10 years, which is quite significant. And the question is how much project we have in the pipe for electrification. We have quite a lot, 30 gigawatt. You have on the screen, all the figures for hydrogen, for manufacturing industry, for data centers. So we have lot of projects which are being planned. Of course, we don't plan that all these projects will be built, but you have on the map the consequences of this electrification. We have different scenarios, but if we would have all these projects being implemented, it will be much more than what we are planning, because we also have the electric cars. We have all of these other electrification implementation, but just this big project, you will see that, you know, when you do hydrogen, when you do this type of application, it's a lot of electricity which will be needed. The thing in France is now is that we have a lot of electricity, so the price is not an issue, and the quantity of electricity is not an issue. There is enough electricity for connecting data centers. There is enough electricity to do hydrogen. So we reach this level that we can connect whatever we want at that stage. But on the other hand, as we continue to connect production, the big challenge is to ensure this electrification will happen. Because if not, we will have in 1 or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years some issue regarding the stability. Too much production is not also something which is needed for the electricity system. You need a balance, and you know that better than me, between consumption and production. So yes, it's a kind of bet. We will continue to increase the production, but also monitor very narrowly the electrification processes to ensure what is being planned is really brought to reality in the next 5 years to ensure this strategy works. Pardon, sorry. So data centers, just to illustrate, we know are attracting a lot of investment in data centers related to this possibility to connect and the price of electricity. And there are a lot of contracts to try to have a long-term contract as well, which are now open. So there is really a big willing of investors to come to France for data centers. And this is also part of the strategy, because as I said, as we have a lot of electricity, we need also all this application to ensure the strategy works. But if you look to the worldwide comparison, we have a long pathway in Europe. I mean, have a look to other countries, like China, for instance, which is really an example. They are really embarking to a very ambitious electrification strategy already by 30%. We are in Europe around 20%. So it shows that we can do more, we can do quicker. And this is not only a French or European strategy, this is a worldwide strategy. Many are turning to electricity, and we do think we can do quicker in Europe. And China is showing us how to do it. So I won't go too much into details, but you will see the big increase in the production in the next 10 years, and also the switch in the final energy consumption between fossil, which is 60% of the final energy consumption today, and the ambition is to switch to 40 in a very quick time, and also to go even more afterwards. This is through electrification, but this is also through a reduction of the final energy consumption through efficiency and different also strategy in that regard. So electrification, I spoke about that. So just some figures, and afterwards you will ask questions. I can come back to the figures if you want, but the messages are more important. So you will see how we do that. So yes, we increase photovoltaic, onshore wind, but you will see on the screen, this is offshore wind, which is really a big ambition in the next 10 years. Afterwards, we will have also nuclear, which will replace and so on, which is also very big in terms of quantity. But in the next 10 years, this is offshore winds. We have also ambition in photovoltaic onshore, but clearly the big bet is to try to embark to a very high ambition in terms of offshore wind. You have the figure here, so you will see that we increase in that regard all type of decarbonized electricity, trying to bring the best we can have in terms of investment and so on, in terms of result and diversification in terms of source of decarbonized electricity. But definitely, this is quite an ambition plan for the next 10 years. We are already embarking now. Yes, I already spoke about that. We try to also communicate that at European level. Our joint strategy is not to develop sources of decarbonized electricity. At the end, is to reduce fossil fuels. So the offer should meet demand. It's not to have more and more electricity at a time where nobody is using it. This is a way producing electricity or energy. What is important is the usages are switching from fossil to other type of electricity. If we only connect new usages like data centers, but don't do anything about the current usage of fossil, we won't succeed. So it's not only, of course, covering the new topics like data centers, AI, such kind of things, but also to monitor in a very direct way how much we are reducing the fossil in terms of usage. And we see with the crisis how much it will cost us to have so much dependency on fossil fuels. In France, it was before the crisis up to 60 billion per year. So 16 billion per year for a country like France is quite an investment in fossil every year. And it's not an investment, it's just paying for the quantity for gas, for fossil fuel and so on. So this is the switch we want to embark on, is to try to derive this cost into concrete investment, and then sparing some money in the fossil fuel, investing in more long-term industry which will produce electricity. But for this, again, it's not only to produce electricity, it's not only to produce decarbonized heating, for instance, it's also to ensure the usages will switch, and that will reduce the use of carbon. Yes, reactors in the field of nuclear, 6 reactors right now, which are being built right now and being planned and built. The final investment decision should be taken at the end of the year, but we should confirm the planning, the localization, and so on for the 8 next one within the next months or year. It will come quite soon at the following up of the first big project of 6 EPR2 reactors. Hydropower, you have the figures, it's to increase. We have 400 megawatt possibilities of increasing the power of existing dam. We have all these projects for pumping, which is quite interesting and important for stabilizing the electricity grid and bring more value in it. So this project will really be possible if you manage to get through the parliament the law we are now discussing right now. Offshore wind, 18 gigawatt by 2037, 15 in 2035. It's huge. It's huge. It's different type of technologies. It's a lot of investment, lot of challenges, because it's not only the turbines, but also the connection to the grid, which is a challenge. Not only this connection, but the change to the grid to be implemented to ensure when you connect on the shore, you have enough network to bring this power to the location where it can be consumed. So this is a really big project making links between RTEs, the grid connectors, and all the project owners through tenders, which will be issued. And we have announced a big tender in the very last days. We keep an ambition in repowering as a priority on onshore. And we have quite a big ambition in that, just keeping the wind farm, but trying to repower them to get more production at the same location. For solar, we keep an ambition. We will reduce in the next 2 years the ambition because we have too much electricity, by getting ready to accelerate again as soon as we have some sign that electrification is bringing results in terms of consumption. This is something we are monitoring, and now we will really adapt in a more agile way, because solar you can reduce, you can accelerate, and try to monitor years after years the exact amount of solar which will be needed in 2-3 years, because it's quite a quick time from the moment you support the project and the moment that this project are connecting to the grid. So this is the strategy we have now, is really to have a 2-3 years vision and to ensure we adapt the level of production to the needs. Lot of ambition as well. You see in the figures in heat, which is also a very big challenge. It's not only electricity, lots of district heating, lots also of topics to have a look at in the field of industry. And this is also, I won't go into details, biogas and others. I can go back to the details if required. We have reduced a bit the ambition in hydrogen, but keeping quite a good level. Because yes, hydrogen in Europe is quite difficult. The investment decisions are difficult to take, but it begins through different supports, and we do believe in it. Why? Because we do believe in industry, and we should support the decarbonization of the hydrogen processes, also to support the industry. We have 400,000 tons of hydrogen being produced, except not in a refinery, in over industry. And of course, we have 900,000 more for refinery, but all together, the current industry is using a lot of hydrogen, which is carbonized. Just to have a look to the future of this industry, this is also a strategy to support that. In France, we support the localized production, so to have industrial hubs in different locations in France, where we try to support hydrogen project to test like business models, which are local in this industry hub, and to see if the industry can develop, reduce the cost, and give a future to the decarbonization of these industrial processes. Overseas territories, I won't go into details, but this is a big challenge as well. We have very different geography, very different electricity energy systems. Some are already decarbonized, like Réunion. Others are investing to increase the level of decarbonization, but it's also very small electricity systems, so there are a lot of particularities, but it's also very interesting because there are a lot of islands on the world, and we try also to implement some experiment and trying to innovate on these islands to test different models for decarbonization. I won't skip this slide, but it's pretty much to details all what I said about the consumption production. Is not only to produce more, but also to ensure we'll have consumption adapted to this production. So this is pretty much the elements I wanted to share in the presentation, and keeping some time for the question and answer, and hoping that the sound was not too difficult at the beginning.
Thank you, Laurent. I think now we hear you very well. And there are already a couple of questions. The first one were about nuclear. The first was about the graphic and asking for the why there's a closure of nuclear plant in France. Is it due to age or energy policy? And the second, which is not really linked but is also nuclear, is about how France will tackle the challenge of the building new nuclear reactors in the next decades.
So I could elaborate very long, but we try to be very clear. So there is no shutdown plan. The only shutdown is, when reactors are getting old, you have an interpretation to make, and it's more investment versus benefits. EDF will invest, and then they discuss with the Nuclear Safety Authority what is required to get the approval for more 10 years. So now they are preparing all the investment to be done to ensure they can go higher than 60 years. And then they will afterwards invest to see if it's possible to go 70 years. There is no, in the French law, any threshold. I mean, the threshold is that every 10 years, you need to ensure with the safety authority that you increase the safety. You study how the equipment are responding due to the age management, and such kind of things. But then the question is how much you need to invest. It will be possible in any case. The question is, it's a negotiation how much to be invested. So it will be extended in every cases. It won't be the same situation in every reactor. So we will see the dialogue, but we are quite confident that the approval for 60 plus years will be somehow given, and there will be find a way. Afterwards, how many reactors we go up to 70 to 80? It's difficult questions, and I will let it to the safety authority and EDF to solve that and to provide us answers. But there is no political or legislation, whatever, which is put an end to the reactors. It can work as long as the safety authority says it's safe enough to be operated. But of course, it has a price, which is investment to do to improve the safety and to manage the lifetime of equipment and so on to ensure it's safe enough, because you have safety objective. And this is in that regard, what we are now trying with EDF to discuss is to ensure there is a strategy to extend the lifetime so that you don't decline like this, but you will decline in a more regular way, so that we have the time to have the new reactors coming and replacing. And this will be elaborated in the next 10 years to ensure the strategy for new build will be consistent with the strategy for lifetime expansion. And at the end, we have a good energy strategy, which is, as I said, to try to stabilize more or less on a longer term the level of production. So this is the first one. So the challenges, many challenges. We have a good technology. We have still companies, but during many years, we haven't built so many reactors. So yes, there was an attempt in France, Flamanville. There was one in Finland. There is 2+2 now in UK. But different regulatory framework, industry restarting, and big project in Europe. You can speak about airports. You can speak about nuclear power plants. Is the same. We have lost a bit the tradition, the competencies to build to plan for very big projects. So we learn again with nuclear. Of course, there were some challenges, obviously, in terms of cost, in terms of planning, and so on. But now this is the first time we have in the UK 2+2, and we have in France 6. This is the first time over the past 30 years that we have a series of reactors. And this is the way we managed in the 80s, in the 70s, to manage costs, to manage delays, and so on, to learn, to replicate. And so this is the challenge for the industry now, but we give the volume, they need to answer us to cost and delay. This is what is being done in China. This is what is being done. So it's, of course, possible. We did it in the past. Other countries have already restarted with a good series and so on. We have now in Europe the beginning of serious reactor. This is for the industry to now invest and relearn again, but also with the new safety standards and so on. So it's a bit more complicated than in the 80s. But then competencies. We train a lot of people. The plan is to hire more than 100,000 people in the next 10 years and to train them in the same way. So it's 50% plus more people in comparison as today. So a lot of people to hire, to train, and so on. And this is the challenge as well, because, you know, in the past, we had a lot of senior people who had built reactors when being young. Now we begin to have the first generation having some experiment in building in Flamanville, sometimes in Goleto, and really now in the UK. And there's a strategy to use these people to train the young one coming and to rebuild a workforce. But for sure, I think it's a European topic. And when you speak about welders, specialized welders, as you know, there are a lot of very specific competencies. We don't think we will be able to rebuild in France, in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in UK, all a big number of specialized welders. So in every country, we need competencies, but we also need cooperation. And we do believe it will be a bit like in oil and gas to have the very specialized one, which, at least at the beginning, will be brought from one project to the other. And all together, we will rebuild a European workforce very good for a nuclear project. This is how we do see the cooperation in that regard in Europe. So it's not only a French topic. And of course, the financing, last but not least, we have supported, we have a model to support the 6 reactors. We are negotiating with the European Commission the authorization of the state aid. We have cooperation also in Europe to standardize, so that it doesn't take too much time to clear it in the Commission. So the process to build the model is one topic as such, to try to do it in a more quick time in the future. So learning from the current experience in different countries. But it's not only a question of state aid process, it's a question of public money. So we are able to provide money, state money for supporting the 6 new one. But afterwards, the industry has to demonstrate they secure the technology so that the cost, the delay are secure, so the risks are declining, so that the private investment, the private funds, banks, all the private sector can invest in a more confident way so that the state can provide less money. And anyway, we no other option because, as you know, the public money is lacking today. So we can do the 6 supporting quite a lot the project. But for the 8 next one, the industry will demonstrate through the series they do better, and then we will work to attract more private investment to ensure we can have an acceleration of the investment, not only in France, it's also a European topic. We speak with Poland, we speak in the UK, for instance, as well, is a very good example where there are lots of investors and not only public one. So this is also a European topic to build an experience for investing in this long-term, very high risk, a lot of money, which is not exactly what private funds like, but we can demonstrate through the time that it's possible.
Thank you. There's another question which is more linked to the current context we are all facing. How is the current war affecting energy sector? The question doesn't mention if the answer is expected for France or Europe, and what the future plan in case the war extending for a long time. So very difficult question, I guess.
So we have some answers in terms of long-term, mid-term, electrification, whatsoever. The problem is that I explained that to my minister, he explained that also to the public and so on. This is very good, but it doesn't bring oil to get in your car at cheap price, because this is the topic of today. Do we have disruptions? Do we have challenges in the supply chain and so on? So in Europe, currently, some difficulties coming, but for April, we're quite confident. For jet fuel, there is some things coming, but we are not sure. For May, a bit more uncertainty. And of course, if the crisis stays as it is, with disruption of Middle East, I mean, you can have a look to the lack of barrels. This is just mathematics. You can have a look to how many barrels is lacking in the world market of oil. You have lots of evaluation, but you can compare 2020, the COVID. This is not to be compared. This is not an offer shock. This is a demand shock. But still, on average, the reduction of demand was between 9 and 10 million barrels per day, which is pretty much we can compare. I mean, you can have different relations. So, okay, it was average on 1 year, 2020. But still, if the crisis would be 1 year long, we will be around these figures. Whatever happens, if the crisis stays as it is, with a disruption with the Middle East. So what does it mean? If the crisis is 1 year long, of course, we will have different problem and be for 1 year. If the Hormuz Detroit reopen, it changes a lot. But on the other hand, installation will need to be repaired. Installation will need to restart. It will last some weeks, some months, so that first the installation can restart, and then the ships, also the whole logistic worldwide will be able to get this oil and to provide it to all the part of the world. So in any cases, we're in a quite long-term crisis. In any case, we hope it will resolve quite quickly. So the war will stop first, of course. Hadn't a look this morning at the news, but we are all looking at hours after hours what is happening there. So first, of course, negotiation, something which make it happen to have stopping the conflict, and then for oil and gas, to see how long time is it required to restart the whole system. We have some destruction, we have the problems of logistics, it will take some time. But of course, if it stops now, it's something. If it stops in 3 months, it's totally something different. So in Asia already, there is a lot of difficulties. In Europe, it's still, some minor things, but not big topics in terms of disruptions. But the prices is already very high. And it's also the big question. We need to give answers to the population and also to give answer to uncertainty, which is very difficult. Today is high prices. If next week is decline, it's something different. So we have announcement today. Let's see how quickly it goes from market to retail prices. But the question is also managing this energy prices discussion, expectation for the population, because of course they need answers. If it's 1 week, it's not the same thing as 3 months. For a company, if you need to change your cost at this level of today, it's on the longer term is something. If it's something which can evolve very quickly, it's something different. So we are managing uncertainty today. We have quite a big crisis right now. It will last anyway some time. Of course, we are trying to manage the uncertainty to try to see, depending on the next days, next weeks, on the situation on site, what are the different scenarios. Of course, different scenarios are very long term. We bring some disruption, quite significant. If it stops, less disruption, but we need to evaluate the time required so that the oil and gas are brought again into the international market. And this is all the work we are doing in every country, in France, like in all other countries, and trying us to monitor the different geographies, because the logistics is not changing, and we try to assess how it is adapting to the situation. So a lot of questions. I'm not sure I am able today to give all the answers, but this is a question of quantity, of course, to avoid disruption or to manage them if they will occur in Europe in the future. And right now, really managing the price, managing the expectation of the price, and what can we do to manage it. And of course, international cooperation in terms of strategic reserves, how we use it. International cooperation in terms of, how we, particularly in Europe, what we're implementing at a national level to manage these price questions, what can we improve, and so on. One point, in France, this time, it was different in 2022. We had some event in the nuclear fleet producing not as much electricity as today. Today, the nuclear fleet is really running full scale, and we have a lot of electricity. The electricity is being sold a lot of time in advance. So 2026, the consumers will see nothing from the crisis. We will keep low prices. Everything is sold, so pretty much no impact. 2027, maybe a bit of impact, but really, really low. So it's a demonstration when you decarbonize your electricity at a high level. Of course, you don't have the same impact as if we have a lot of gas. And this is something which is also bring some confidence on the long-term strategy. But anyway, we need answers for oil in your cars for today. It's not to say in 2 years you will have an electric car. We need to do so. We'll accelerate electrification, of course, but we also need to manage the crisis for oil and gas, which is not in 2 years, it's today, in the next 2 months.
There's another question about lessons. What useful lesson can developing countries with high energy deficit can learn from France's energy trajectory, nuclear future or renewable, and other? So I think, I don't know, what can you share about that? It's a difficult question because every country has its own resources. So
yeah, exactly. And also it's to learn, but it's every time interesting compared to share. And we have a lot of things to learn. As I said, we have different geography in France. I mean, if you compare New Caledonia, Réunion, or continental France, it's totally different geographies and circumstances. So every country has its own richness in terms of resources, in terms of geography, in terms of sun or not. And of course, building on renewables and on your natural resources is, of course, the best thing you can do, which is quite cheap. I mean, solar energy can bring a lot of very, very smart solutions, particularly in countries where the electrification is just beginning. I mean, you can begin to bring energy in some regions directly with sun and electrification of villages and so on. We do so for instance, in Guyana, in the French Guyana, we have villages which are absolutely isolated in the forest, in the Amazonia. And we have a lot of projects bringing integrated system with some solar panels with, it's not very high level of power, but this is exactly the needs they have. They need the grid, they need all of the stuff. And we have all this electrification of villages in a particular geography. Of course, if you're in a different geography, it will be different. But the main message is planning and planning, trying to optimize the cost, and all the time reflecting on cost, planning, investment, and also trying to build for local industry, of course, to try to have more companies benefiting from your investment. And this is not easy because it will depend, of course, and you have, building cheap things is important because you have big countries bringing a lot of cheap equipment and so on. So it's also, let's say, a question of strategy between accelerating the decarbonization, trying to have new companies building on knowledge locally and so on. What about nuclear? Of course, nuclear is a very interesting thing, but it takes time. So it's a very long strategy, and we try also to cooperate with many countries. It takes time. You will have the benefits, but it's a readiness of the society to embark on a 20 years, 30 years journey. And then, of course, you have a long-term strategy which brings a lot of benefits. But of course, if you need to build the first competencies, this is what we did, but 1940, 1950, and it's only 1970 that we had a nuclear fleet and so on. So it takes time. Of course, today you can benefit from the experience of others. It will be quicker, but still, it's also trying to build on the capacity of the society to invest on the long term. But this is obviously an option to consider, but it's legislation, authority, it's a lot of things, and this is possible, but takes a bit of time to ensure you will tick all the boxes required for nuclear. This is pretty much what I can share.
I don't know if we have still time for other questions because there are a lot of questions. So I don't know if we can take one or two more.
Yep.
For you. It's okay. Another question about decarbonization of transportation, fuel, aviation, marine. And the question is more, the question was initially, is it linked, is it your mandate? Is it on the same mandate? But you have bring the question after. What is the priority of the decarbonization strategy of that sector today for France and where we are? And
aviation is a very interesting topic because this is the only area where we have incorporation obligation. So you have level 2030, 2035, and so on, increasing the level of incorporation of safety aviation fuel, the sustainable aviation fuel, and also e-fuel. So we have a strategy quite ambitious to bring the companies to incorporate more and more decarbonized fuel. But lots of questions. First, are we sure we'll have the quantity ready for the years where you have an obligation? So we need an industry. And then there is a question, okay, are we able to get an industry which will bring enough quantity on the market so that the aviation airlines can buy it? First question. Second question, this is international market. It will increase the price. It's quite manageable. It's an increase, but it's not, from Paris to New York, if you have sustainable aviation fuel, maybe at the end it will double the price. It's not 20 times, not 30 times, but still, if you have one company saying it's 100 and the other is saying it's 200, you will lose the customers. So how we manage this strategy in an international market? We can begin anyway because our cooperating a bit and more at the beginning is not a big thing, but how we manage that companies will do a short flight outside of Europe and then for the long haul not comply with the same obligation, the same regulation, of course, there is competition difficulties. So at the end, to succeed, this type of strategy would be worldwide. I don't know if it will happen, but we try to find an answer at the European level and to try to see how it works. But it's a question of international competition, and it's a question of price. Are we ready to pay a bit more to take the airlines? I do think in airlines, taking the plane for many people, it's possible to get a bit more money. But how much? Let's see. It's really different with, having electricity for your fridge or heat and so on, where it's really, not so many people can pay more. So it's also a review to do how much the airlines company is ready to invest in this decarbonization. How much does it cost? To do a bit is not a problem, but if we want to work a more ambitious strategy, of course, all this question related to investment decision for producing e-fuel, sustainable aviation fuel is a question, and quantity. And second question, how you finance that? Is it based on the price of tickets? And then you need to ensure that passengers are ready or can, in terms of affordability, pay the tickets. And there are also other thinking in maritime as well, but we don't have the obligation right now. But still, many companies are reviewing also for security and stabilizing the price, because with fossil is also very volatile. We do see it right now in the crisis. But we have a lot of cooperation also, but not with obligation embedded in the regulation right now. You had a second question, maybe?
No. We had another about SMR. What is the strategy of France regarding SMR, and also more precise, is there any possibility of developing SMR like SMR installed in submarines?
So we try to support different technology in that regard. Some are mature, some less mature. Some are really producing electricity or heat. Some are not only doing that, but also embarking to fourth generation reactors. So now we are trying to see there is startups making projects. This is good. And then we see which project we are supporting today and tomorrow. And we are trying to refine our strategy in that regard. This is a French strategy. There is also a European strategy. The Industrial SMR Alliance. We try also to compile the experience in that regard. Definitely, to work, such a strategy cannot be only one nation. It should be international. It should be European. It should be a strategy to replicate reactors in every country. It was already the case for big, giant reactors, but it is even more the promise of SMR, is to make prefabricated models for the reactors in one country and the other being assembled, like the airlines, like Airbus. So we really need to cooperate as of Europe, not only to modularize the manufacturing, but also to have already 5, 6, 7 exemplars, so that we can also have this replication working. Because as it's a bit smaller, it will need to be replicated a number of times. This is the first point. So European strategy for that is required. And the second is, yes, for electricity, hybrid. We have new reference, which is testing the business model for hybrid electricity and heating. But definitely heating is a quite interesting point, because we don't have so many options for decarbonizing heating. For industry, high temperature heating, not so many options. So nuclear is definitely one. And that's why I think we need to push at European level to support it much more, because it's also an option for the future. It's working technology in other paper. The challenge is not only that it's working in terms of technology, but it also finds customers, it finds a business model, and so on. And that for sure requires some cooperation at the level of Europe, not only the technology, but also on testing the business model, which will make this technology happening or not. Many attempts didn't succeed. We need to try. We need to try as much as we can, and not only at the level of nation, but with a European cooperation, and even more beyond Europe with other partners worldwide.
Other question about energy affordability. What about PPE3 and energy affordability? Do you think it is built to allow that? Do you have projection, or is it too complicated or too uncertain today to
I will require 1 hour to give a detailed answer, but there's affordability and cost. The big question on France, the big debate is what is the cost for the system? And having the first solar panel being connected on the system is one thing. Having too much solar panel being connected, you don't have the same cost to the system. So it's also an evolving answer to see for the different type of energy, how will you assess the contribution to the electricity system and the cost, not only direct cost, but also, all you need to balance the system, the battery one side, how you need to balance the consumption, the production, and so on. So this is a big question. What is the cost of the system? How can we optimize, reduce the cost of the system? The second thing is the support from the state. We support many sources of electricity, renewables, and so on. There is a mission to try to optimize that, how we can optimize, with the same amount of money, have more results. This is the second topic which we are, and everything is related, of course. And the third topic is not only to finance things from debts. At the end, the customer is paying. He's paying for electricity, he's paying for the grid. So depending on your choice on the system, you will have more investment of the grid, but the investment of the grid is being paid by the customer. And then we come to the question of affordability. How will you ensure that the full system is sustainable in terms of financing? This is, of course, a big debate, not only in France, it's a European debate, and worldwide even more, but we have more closer system to discuss that. And yes, I don't have the answer. I have a lot of questions, and of course, the responsibility to ensure we plan better and better to try to ensure we can predict what will be the cost of the electricity in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But as I said, we also have interesting results. Some people are saying, we're saying before the crisis, the price of electricity is a bit too low to repay investment. This is also some important that the investment are being paid, the one which are not supported by the state. But still, it's managing all the interest in the system, investors, customers, state, and we need all the time to optimize all the system and to think the system, which is not easy today. But at the end, having a decarbonized system is expensive. It will cost both the states and the customers. But have a look to the crisis we are experiencing now. How much will be the cost for Europe? How much will be the cost for France? How much will be the cost for countries in Asia? It's massive. So it's like an insurance. When you pay insurance, oh, wow, it's very expensive. When you have an incident, you understand why it is made for. It's a bit the same thing. Yes, it's investing, but it's investing for the future, trying to soften the future crisis, trying to soften the climate change, at least to contribute the most we can to reduce the effect of the climate change. If we do it worldwide, at least a bit, we'll have some success. And then trying to save the money we will need to invest for adaptation. So yes, it's a cost. We need adaptation, optimization, acceptance. Dialogue with the public, how much he's ready to pay now in the future, and long-term views, because what we are now investing will bring some cost today, but also in 20 years. So this is a full system that we try to capture in this planning process, which is not perfect, but at least it's a try. And it allows us to share with you, to share with others, and to get also your experience and to try to do better, not only we, but all together.
There is a question from an Irish colleague. Say that Ireland has an historic reluctance to nuclear power, but has a lot of solar and wind. With your experience of the French energy mix, but also probably European, do you think Ireland could solely work on interconnectors and majority wind, or would we need to consider nuclear? I think
we already do that, and it depends the question of time. I don't know what other plans here. Ireland, if you would consider to embark on nuclear, as I said, it would take some time. So anyway, it will be for some time. You see in France, we have turned 2022 to the project. It will take some result, 2040 and afterwards. So it's a long journey. And yes, I do think other countries in Europe could consider nuclear, but this is a question for the countries. I'm not giving any advice. It's for every society, every country, every parliament, governments to take the decision. But on the other hand, what we should do at the level of Europe is to think European. Whatever the choices are, we need to have a better conscious what will be the electricity mix interconnected in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. We have a big debate on the grid package. It's to be planned how much we interconnect each other, how much we invest in our national grid, and altogether it will have consequences. So our mix will have consequences in Ireland because we already have interconnectors. We might have more with UK. We have with Germany. So all our strategy have not only an impact in our nation, but with the neighbors. And this is the direction we need to embark on. Is nuclear is anyway required out of Europe because of it brings some stability in the system, but renewables are also required because we won't be able to increase as much as we want the level of decarbonized electricity to replace slowly, but I hope very quickly, coal first, and also managing the gas and dependency of gas and so on. So this is something to be planned together. So Ireland is welcome to discuss with us if you have plans to embark to nuclear, but we need to discuss anyway, because your journey, our journey, through the interconnection and cooperation in Europe, we might be able to design an adapted mix at the level of Europe 2050, 2060, 2070. But we have a lot of work to do, not to think only national, not only to think interconnectors, but to think together national production, evolution of the mix, national grid, interconnectors, and then connecting our strategy, we might have a chance to have a better optimization of the cost, global cost of the European system. So this is what I would answer in 2 minutes.
Thank you for this answer. And I think we have covered quite all the questions. And I would like to ask you if you have a concluding word to share with the community. It's very international today. So
personally, I do share very much international cooperation. And I think your community is really interesting because it's mixing a lot of different people, a lot of countries, a lot of different views. And we all need that, sharing values in terms of understanding. We do share a lot. So we see that in the crisis. We all have similar challenges, different effects right now, but we are all being challenged in our strategy and so on. So sharing experience, sharing facts, sharing studies, discussing, presenting each of our strategy. I do think as an individual, this is the best we can do. And this is exactly what we do in your community. So thank you very much for the invitation and giving me this opportunity. It was a pleasure. And of course, don't hesitate to send me emails if we have detailed questions. And very happy to take part to other events like that. It's all the time a pleasure.
Thank you, Laurent. Thank you all of you for joining us. And as Laurent said, we will continue, of course, that kind of sharing as we already did before. And it will be a pleasure to have all of you and to continue that. Thank you very much to all of you and see you at the next webinar. Bye.
Bye.